Welcome back, you all, to the After Sessions podcast. It's so good to be with you all today. I'm Juan.
I'm Gilbert.
And I'm Lydia.
So today's theme, as per the audience request, is on grief and loss.
Let's dive right into it.
What comes to y'all's mind whenever we hear the word grief?
You want to go first?
Well, I think for most people, when you hear the word grief, it's associated with death, the loss of somebody, a loved one perhaps. But I think it's far more complex than that. That's kind of a feeling that comes with a loss. But then what else falls into that category?
Yeah, there's just so many different types of losses. But the actual grief, to me, it's a response to the loss.
Yeah.
So the grief is, I've heard it said it's an emotion. I don't know if I agree with that, but I will say it's a process, maybe even a state of being. But yeah, to me, Lydia, when you ask what comes to mind, the grieving process, grief, it's a response to a loss.
So then when people would tell you, oh, I'm grieving, right? We're using it as an emotion. How would we break it down from that? Like, for it to be more than that?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind, at least, is, okay, so this person just lost an object. It could be a marriage. They just got a divorce. Someone died. Their house burned down. I've had patients in the past that do that. Empty nest syndrome. That's a huge thing. So that's the first thing that comes down and breaking it down.
Changing your health status or the health status of a loved one, things like that. Yeah, all of those things are definitely triggers to process that loss. A status of something is now not the same. So
we could be talking about grieving something while it's still technically there, right? Like everything that we've mentioned right now, we could physically still see it, whether like it's with our eyes, we're still talking to people. There's like different life stages that it's not just the loss of a loved one.
Yeah. You could be a mom, a single mom. I've had single moms in the past here in New York State where their last little chickie is about to fly away to university. And the little chickie is still there, but she knows she's about to lose him in 2 months when their child leaves. And so, that makes sense, Lydia.
Yeah. I was thinking also about how, especially right now with social media, we're always talking about grieving the version of us that never happened. Right.
Yes, definitely. Shattered dreams.
I'm lost in that. What does that mean?
When we go through these like life stages, right? We're doing all these transitional things in our life. And sometimes I've had clients that sometimes feel very sad about the version of themselves that doesn't exist because of an event that happened, maybe
teenage
a breakup.
pregnancy.
Yeah, teen pregnancies, a breakup, anything. And sometimes they mourn the person that could have been if this one specific thing didn't happen.
I know I must have had patience like that, but for some reason that sounds just profound for me.
The two that are coming up is, for example, people who have lost mobility or athletic mobility. Like, for example, I was going to be this athlete, a football player, and then my meniscus tore and no longer could play. So that was taken from me.
True story?
Yeah. Like I didn't happen to me, but I've seen it with patients or even the ones that are coming up. I have several patients where they've gotten trouble, legal trouble with the law, things like that. And, they're in the process of investigation and they're kind of like pending what's going to happen, what's going to be the outcome. And then the family members themselves are now dealing with the massive changes that might come after this. So that's all grieving. That's all grieving.
So in the 1970s, I love this lady. I met her in Chicago. Her name is Dr. Pauline Boss, BOSS. So she was very well-known family therapist, very known researcher in the world of social work, clinical social work. Yeah. She invented this concept. She came up with this concept called an ambiguous loss. And so an ambiguous loss for her, it describes a specific type of grieving process that lacks clarity, that lacks resolution, or no immediate finality. Yeah. For example, I don't know, you have a patient was in a car accident and he's in the hospital and he's alive, but he's brain dead. So physically he's there. You could touch him. Yeah. He's warm to the touch, but he's not there. So, I mean, and so I had a patient like that too. He knew he was going to get debarred. It was a lawyer. He knew what was coming, and but it hadn't happened yet. So, and to me, an ambiguous loss is the worst type of loss that you can go through. Because, you lost it, but not yet.
Yeah. And I feel something that we see on social media a lot also is people talking about like this phases of grieving and having to break it down to our clients about
the 5 stages.
Yeah. Like how grieving isn't linear.
Yeah. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Yeah. So that, essentially the Kubler-Ross is probably the most famous model for helping people conceptualize loss. What are the stages?
It's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance.
Yeah, I know. There's a 7-stage model, but my thing with the Kubler-Ross is, and I think a big misconception that people make is that people believe that they have to go in a certain order.
There are steps that we have to take.
Which you were saying that it's not linear. Yes.
And that's when they end up showing up in our offices because they
thought they were done.
Yeah. And it shows up in a different way. A car that they see, music that they hear that reminds me of them, or little things like that I don't think a lot of people take into consideration. And I've just noticed it nowadays with my clients in particular, where the grieving never ends and they have such a hard time coming to terms with that. Like, when is the grieving process over? When am I going to feel normal? Or
when I tell my patients when it comes to that, and I think that very Gestalty thing is that the memory is always going to be there, but all the emotional baggage is not. Because not only are you going to become accustomed to the new normal and the absence of whatever was lost or whomever was lost, but then it also has to do with, okay, how you have grown also as a person and grown around the pain, and it's no longer, now you put it in the right place and you're able to now continue and adapt and move. And that's one of the things that I work a lot with my clients is like, what are some of the things that we need to look at? Because when people are grieving, many times they get so caught up in the process, and they get so caught up in the memories, and they get so caught up in ruminating in the person, and the person's no longer there, or the status or what have you. But then usually what I do to circumvent a lot of that and working with them is, if they lost a person, one of the things that I like to do real quick is like focusing them on this. So like, okay, what do you miss most about this person? Or what did you learn most about this person? And then the next question would be, tell me XYZ, their resilience, their strength, they're always happy or what have you. And then I'll go with, okay, so how are you then living their memory or honoring their memory in the way you live and in the way you're processing this right now? And then another follow-up would be, if this person was sitting here in this room listening to you right now, what would they tell you?
Yeah.
And that really like flips the perspective, and how they're going about it, and all exactly the opposite way of how that person would have wanted them to.
I like that, because I have a lot of patients that tell me, I don't want to let go. And that's a big misconception of the grieving and bereavement process, that that, okay, so I'm going to go through these 5 stages. So I'm going to bounce around them.
Yeah.
Denial, bargaining with God, bring him back, and I'll be a better Christian. And a lot of people don't want to go through that because that means I'm going to forget about
exactly
my loved one. So I do that too. The legacy, how can we honor the deceased person's legacy? And that's a method that we keep them together. That's one of the main things I do too.
Yeah, and you bring up God and the spirituality aspect of death, right?
Absolutely.
It kind of reminds you of like, I've never experienced like a big loss. The only loss I've had was an uncle that passed away, like I think when I was a teenager. But I remember being so angry, and that's when I lost faith. And it took me like 15 years to regain faith because I was so upset and angry at it. And that's what when clients come in like with that anger, I recognize it because we're trying to find this understanding of why is it happening or why did this happen.
Why were you upset, or why did you, I mean, if you could go back as a teenage with your teenage mindset, because I have a lot of teens like that. So what was going on in your mind that you just projected blame on God? Or I don't know.
Just like any other teenager, right? We try to find the easiest like response because as a teen, nobody was talking to me. What was happening? I understood. Third stroke, right? Playing soccer, he was healthy, and then all of a sudden fell in the middle of playing. The concept of how are you okay to exercise and go back to doing what you love to all of a sudden just dropping in the middle of a game was wild to me at that time.
But I think what you said, nobody was explaining it to her.
Yeah.
But also, I guess a deeper question would be like, what does that say about God from your perspective?
Never thought of it like that.
As a teen?
As a teen, I was just upset. I was angry,
And where's that coming from?
Well, from not understanding, what's going on.
Yeah.
And we my family's from Honduras, so we had to travel back, and it was a whole hot mess of doing that. And at 15, dealing with those things, the anger lived with me for years. My son has his middle name, in that honor. And I think that's when I started to let go and finding faith again, of course.
Yeah. I've recently been to a couple of funerals, and you all know I'm a mariachi. I'm a musician, and so I play at funerals a lot. I play at the rosaries, the wakes, and there's just some comments that are made that, as a clinician, I know are just harmful. Theologically speaking, like, oh, well, God needed an angel, and that's why you took him, and it's just these...
It makes God arbitrary.
Yeah, it makes God very arbitrary, and it makes God look like the bad guy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's I mean, I'm a pastor, so I marry and bury people. So one of the things that I that I deal with is dealing with death and having to process that quite a bit. But see, that's the beauty about God. Sometimes when we don't understand, and I don't mean to turn this into a theological argument, but it's important to understand biblically what this means, because if you really hold on to the Christian faith, and understand, you believe the Bible, then there's such a wealth of resource and such a wealth of support there. Because I tell my congregation this, I've preached this several times. Jesus did not come to make evil men good. He came to make dead men live. He came to give us eternal life. And if you believe that, and he proved that by his physical resurrection from the dead, everything Jesus said he was going to do, he backed it up, with miracles, with facts. So if he's telling us that we will also rise with him and we will have eternal life, we see it in John chapter 14. We see it in several places. And then Paul, I love this because Jesus guarantees that. So I tell some of my Christian patients and congregations, when we lose somebody, we're going to grieve them for 5, 6, 7 decades. If we live that long. But then there's that reunification. How do you compare those few decades with eternity?
Okay, so let's take all that and let's go back to Lydia. I wonder if you would have been mad if you had someone explain to you, really your Christian beliefs around death and eternal life, and that this lifetime, it's only a speck of eternity.
Yeah. Well, even at that time when we would like talk about it, we would hear that, of course, over there in Honduras, it's very different funeral services. And here, I walked into my grandmother's house and caskets right there in the living room and opened everything. Yeah. And I mean, I knew the concept, like he is no longer here.
Yeah.
But everybody was grieving, like they were so sad. And I think what I was really feeling at that point was fear, because it was the first time that, death was right in front of me. Yeah. And the concept of, well, what am I actually going through after this, that I had nobody to talk to about that, and just anger.
So I think what's coming up to me is how us adults, parents, uncles, godparents, we need to really understand and think about death. Memento mori. Yeah.
Know that you will die.
Keep death in the forefront of your conscience, that you will die. And that way we can help kids so they won't suffer.
Yeah. And I think also the approach in the funeral, where you're describing this funeral that's relatively traumatic, where everybody's breaking down and you have, the open casket and things like that. But I've seen many funerals where there's nothing like that. Yes, there is people crying, but it's more of a celebration of life than oh my God, this person. There, people are jumping into the on top of the casket and things. There's more of this celebration of life, of saying this person is now received the ultimate healing. That is, and I think that changes the perspective of a lot of individuals.
I think when the first time that I ever saw something different than what the Laredo, Texas, Mexican culture was in India when I was studying there. I went to my first funeral. I want to say it was a Hindu funeral, and no women were allowed to go to the funeral, because women, they tend to be more hyper emotive, so no women were allowed, and everybody wore white. And they were just, they wore white. And I asked, and they said, well, because, and I'm going to read something to y'all. So, this is a guy quoting Mother Teresa of Calcutta. So Mother Teresa told me that her most important work is with the dying, because she considers life so precious. Life is an achievement, she said, and dying the end of that achievement. It is one of the most important times of our lives. And so yeah, I think that was the first time I ever got a different perspective on dying, on death. Very different from here. And I think if we expand our meaning, the meaning that we put to death, I mean, we won't be depressed.
Yeah. I think what really was the life-changing passage that really did it for me was Paul, when he was telling his followers, "I'm going to Rome," and they're telling him, "No, don't go to Rome.
Yeah,
because you're gonna die. They're gonna execute you." And he's going, "No, I'm going to Rome." And he goes, and he says this: "For me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain." I don't know which one to follow, but I'd rather be with my Father. Yeah. I'd rather be with my Lord. So that's his conclusion, right? And I love that. And then in Ephesians not Ephesians, it's 2 Timothy chapter 4, when he's concluding the letter, he says, "I'm ready to be poured out." Like, he knows that in a few weeks he's going to be executed by Nero. "I'm ready to be poured out as a liquid offering." And he goes, "I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. And now awaits for me a crown of glory."
He was in jail when he wrote that.
So he's really about to be. That's the last letter he writes, right? And I love what he says. I have finished the race. I have fought the good fight. I have kept the faith. I want to go out like that.
Yeah,
I want to go out like that. And that's really what really switched my perspective on this.
So there's this Argentinian poet. I love the guy. His name is Facundo Cabral. He said. And I'm going to switch over to Spanish. He said, "No perdiste a nadie. El que se murió simplemente se nos adelantó."
Sí.
Porque para allá vamos todos.
Sí.
¿Quién podría decir que Jesucristo está muerto? And this is where he ends. No hay muerte, hay mudanza. I love that.
Yeah.
I get chills every time. But that's, I think that's a healthy perspective that to give to our patients, that death may end a life, but it doesn't end the attachment. It doesn't end the relationship.
That's true. But yet with society, everything that we hear is, you know, maybe they're better off, or at least they're no longer suffering. You know, little tidbits here and there that are meant to make you feel better, and they don't. Right. And I think for us, like, we have a different view on grief now, right? We've had to like tackle these demons when it comes to our fears of loss.
And I think that
will help our patients.
And it takes the thing about society is society doesn't like to talk about that. It's taboo. It's a taboo subject, even though there's a very fatalistic view of death, and people just avoid it altogether. They don't want to talk about it. And unfortunately, many people live as if they're never going to die. And maybe people die as if they never lived because of the same thing, because of that avoidance.
Why don't people want to talk about it? Face it.
Well, just how earlier, you know, before we even started, just the thought of, you know, of death, like, it makes us feel sad. You know, even right now when we talk about it, I can't help but feel sad too, like just a little bit, even though it's a very important topic to talk about. The thought of just losing someone is, you know, it's not a happy mood. Nobody wants to feel sad or, you know, angry or.
But I mean, let's just rewind what we were talking about. I mean, man, like, I'd rather be in heaven with my God than be here.
Yeah. Exactly. I sometimes ask, you know, this is gonna, it's literally a cartoon, so it's a caricature. But if you've seen Ice Age, remember that squirrel that wants to get that nut, right? So he's trying to get that hazelnut, and finally it dies. You know, and then there's this, like, he walks through the gates, the pearly gates, and there's this gigantic, you know, and he's about to get it, and then he's pulled back, and then like Sid's actually giving him CPR, and he gets all mad because he gets pulled away from that. You know, I think that when the day I ask people like that, describe heaven to me, and they're like, sometimes they're at a loss. I'm like, oh, it's the best place ever. Like, where would you rather be, and where would you rather your loved one be, here or over there?
But I think also when we think about like grief itself, we're not taking into consideration like ourselves, like our individual identities.
Yes.
We're thinking about everybody else.
Exactly.
You know, because when, like, with the question that you asked, like, I feel calm and peace, right? I don't think of like a party or anything else. But I think more about, you know, how is my husband going to respond? How is my son going to be? I don't think about me. I think about everybody else. Like, and that's alone is what makes it feel sad.
It's scary. I mean, when I had my news of cancer the first time, you know, I remember
about that.
Bro, I remember the hardest thing,
man.
See, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You know, I remember I told my wife, but when the doctor was telling me that, I'm like, oh, so that's how it feels for them to tell you got cancer, right? And I'm like, kind of like analyzing everything, and I'm like, okay, well, you know, I'm ready. I'm ready to go. I've had a good run. It's good. But the thing was, like, how do I tell my kids? And there were a bunch of them who were graduating at the time. So how do I tell them? So I'm going to wait until the graduation's done, and then I'm going to tell them. And I told several people, I told my kids don't know, don't tell them. I'm going to tell them when they're ready. And I told my wife, you know, like, hey, you know what? I had a good run. I had a good life. I mean, I'm good. I'm good to go. I know where I'm going. She goes, I'm ready to go. My wife, well, I'm not. And, well, that's your problem, babe. You know, like, so
you did not tell
I did tell her that. You can ask her, man. So I tell her.
And is that what you were talking about, Lydia? Like the family, how that?
Yeah, that I think more when we think of grief, it's, you know, I at one point I was only getting clients that were grieving. You know, there was like it was
an influx.
Yes, like one after another, you know, and I mean it in the same week. Like my parent passed away, and then another session, another day, my parent passed away. It was like, we have those moments where like, wow. But they were talking so much about the process of grief on themselves and how they were trying so hard to be strong.
Yeah.
So
for everybody else.
For everybody else. And like stepping up to this new role, it's like, well, my dad's no longer here, so I'm the man of the family now. And I have to step up and I have to be responsible. And you just see this switch. So, when you're talking about it, I think of your kids, how I don't know if you caught yourself, but you said when they're ready, not when you're ready. We were waiting for us, like for you to be ready to tell them like this horrible news that was going to shock them to their core. But we kind of save ourselves to be like, oh, well, I'm going to wait for them to be ready. But there's never a good time to let any bad news drop. That's the thing with loss. It's a thought that.
Yeah. I didn't want to ruin their graduations. So I literally waited for my daughter to graduate, and I didn't tell her till the next day. And that was my last one I was waiting for. And that's when I told everybody, and we prayed, and someone cried a little bit, but they all know where this ends, So it's just that. I mean,
and I think it's a lot easier if for example, our families, those people that are closest to us, if they have a healthy understanding of death.
Yeah. And I was very, very adamant and reviewing that with them. This is what the scripture says. This is what it says. So that way they know. And I know that they know.
What about...
I was lucky, though, that my kids were already...
of age.
16, 17. My youngest was 16 at the time. And my oldest was already in their mid-20s. So they were, they were mature enough to understand that. Now with little kids, it's a whole different story.
Yeah,
and also people that are atheists, non-believers. I mean, I think if you've lived and practiced here in Laredo, Texas, then you meet a bunch of Christians and everything. But once you start to get out there, I mean, there's all these other religions that have different concepts of death. The whole reincarnation thing. So
not everybody has religion to fall back into.
That's right.
And even when we have these clients that maybe they don't have a strong faith, how do we talk to them?
And it's kind of difficult because we're called to be neutral. We're called not to impose my
belief system,
my subjective belief systems onto our patients. So what I do is I ask them, I mean, very
what does this mean to you?
What does this mean to you? What, I mean, who taught you about death? I mean, and believe it or not, a lot of people go back to Bambi, The Lion King, all of these, movies, cartoons about death.
And it's interesting you bring that up because I was just talking about this with a client, how now kids nowadays, their concept of death is so different because of video games. In video games, you die, you come back right away. So whenever they have a loss that happens in their head, in their minds, they don't understand that they're not coming back. They're not going to be relived.
Insightful. It's a good point.
Yeah. So now with the kids that I service, getting them to understand like, okay, it's not like a video game, right? This isn't going to happen, but we're connected through like an invisible string, and they relate to it as much as they can through books and all that. But it's not as easy as, oh yeah, let's watch Bambi, because they've never seen Bambi before.
Yeah.
I remember I treat a lot of foster kids, and there's one time there was maybe a decade or two ago where CPS called me and they asked me if I could help explain to two toddlers that their mom had died of an overdose. Obviously, I'm not going to tell them the overdose, but we read some books, and my creativity was very rampant that day, and I'm very glad. But I saw a dead bug, there, and so the kid said, "Oh, this bug is dead." And then I started the conversation. "Oh, I wonder if that bug, is that a mommy bug or a daddy bug?" And then, "Oh, it's a mommy bug." And I said, "Well, how would the children feel if that their mommy bug died?" And so that got us started. And so we have to, I think as clinicians, we have to be creative sometimes with people, with kids.
Well, I mean, when I deal with kids, I don't do a lot of work with kids because I work with adults, but I've dealt with pretty much Buddhists. I've dealt with Muslims. I've dealt with a lot of atheists also. Well, at that point, you basically look at what their belief system of death is, and then work within that, and
within that framework.
With that framework, so like they cease to be. Well, if they cease to be, then they're no longer suffering. So then we can look at suffering. We can look at those types of things, and that'll bring some alleviation. But that's I mean, that's, I guess, the extent of it. When it comes to dealing with different ideas, children are a little bit more difficult with that.
But even in like modern society, everything that we talk about is always this idea that we have to let go. And the person passed away already. We need to let them go, and we need to move on.
There's so many myths, like when it comes to grief and that process, that just are kind of annoying if I could be trying forward.
Yeah.
What are some of these myths that you all that frustrate you, or maybe they make sense to you all?
Well, I think the time heals everything.
That's a Willie Nelson song.
Yeah.
The healing hands of time.
Yeah.
Well, that one, I would say that it does, but there's not a specific time frame for it. I've had clients that would come in and say, "It's been 6 months. Why am I still sad?
You should be over it by now."
They hear that. Or
it's another myth.
People look at them like, "Come on, bro. Like, we're still talking about this." That idea that we should have already been over it and in the next phase of our life, and everything should be okay.
And I remember somebody, one of my interns, he actually is an expert on this, Mark Carreon. He's an expert on dealing with grief. He did a lot of work with that, does a lot of work with that. And he told me something he read somewhere, and it stuck with me, that for those people who say things like, "You should be over it by now because it's been so much so much time since this happened." Somebody wrote somewhere something to the effect of, if you've never suffered this long for the loss of somebody, count yourself blessed, because you never experienced that. So that whole thing about you should be over it by now, it depends. I know a lot of people who get stuck in the process for whatever reason.
I think a reframe also, I think that's true for exactly what you said. Consider yourself blessed is if you're suffering, because to suffer implies that there was an attachment between you and the object that was lost. So, and that's such a beautiful thing. Such a beautiful thing.
Or even mourning the loss with like the connections that we have made with people too.
And it's something that I see a lot with veterans also. There's this idea that, hey, it's over, just move on. It's in the past. You should be good. Just that suck it up mentality, that the military instills in you. Yet there's a lot, just because you pretend that it's done and you haven't really processed it, that comes up, and that's there. It's always there.
And it's usually the ones that say those things, you should be over it by now. It's the ones that have no subjective experience of what they went through in the wars. At least that's been my experience with veterans.
Or maybe they didn't process it properly. They're just balling it up. But the problem is that's why we have, that's one of the reasons why we have so much suicide amongst them, because it's a lot of this unprocessed stuff. You lost your buddy, next to you. You're this guy that you went to basic with, this guy that you train with, this guy that, you were just, 30 minutes ago, you were talking about girlfriend, the future. All of a sudden, the guy's not there no more. It's very easy to just kind of put it past and go on, but that stuff sticks with you. It doesn't go away.
And it lives with you too in conversations that you have. And it takes talking to somebody that is actually listening to you.
Yeah.
No, because, right, the dark humor,
Yeah.
very popular against men, I would say that, or anybody really, and that's how we cope with. So in everything, there's like a hidden message. And all of a sudden, the dark humor joke comes out and you don't laugh and you just sit with them and you're like, why did you just say that? You know? And it just reminds them of these moments when they're deployed or in their basic and they lose them. It's just something different.
But the dark humor is actually a coping mechanism. I heard somebody say, "Do you know how much trauma I had to go through to become this funny?" So yeah, absolutely. But like you're absolutely right. Having somebody to listen, somebody to work, and that's really, really important.
Mm-hmm. I feel that also with men. Surprisingly, like I have a lot of male clients, and they're virtual.
Okay.
And and they're also vets. Like that's the theme with my virtual clients and I don't have favorite clients, but I really love talking to these clients that when you can see that they've gone through all this loss, but they don't know how to talk about it. So what do? They joke around, they do the curse words, they're dancing around the subject about loss, and they never really want to talk about it because the military mentality is like, we just suck it up and move forward.
Yeah, you don't want to show weakness.
Yeah. And with Robert, when I spoke to him last month, that's what he had said was, asking for help isn't weakness. It's a sign of being strong.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of men and vets need to hear that because society is changing and mental health is more out there. And when it comes to grieving, everybody processes it different, but I think men carry it, in my opinion, it the heaviest because it's normal for women to be emotional and to just cry and be sad. And
true vulnerability is strength. True strength is being vulnerable.
Yeah.
But how do you get men to understand that?
Especially military men. The thing is that
there has to be a paradigm shift. And I see it. I see it everywhere. I see it a lot where there's a lot of mental health awarenesses. I mean, I think we had a podcast a couple months ago I was actually on a podcast with Gallo Fino barbershops. And
was that last year?
No, it might have been last year. Yes, it was last year. And the owner, Fred de Anda, he was great. He wanted to bring this forward. I mean, what's the typical culture atmosphere in a barber shop? You just got a bunch of guys, bantering with each other and being men but the owner of this Gallo Fino barbershop, I mean, he wanted to bring it. So from men's awareness, he wanted to talk about suicide. So it's getting out there, and I think that's what makes it a little bit easier for men to at least take a couple steps forward.
I would hope so, because one thing when you were talking about it was making me smile, because with the World Cup, this is when we see, at least like when they pan to the audience, we see men crying. When their soccer team like makes the goal, and we see like this big like expression of emotion. And at least like on my part, right, we're not judging them from crying for their soccer team like reaching this goal. But when it comes to other emotions, I wonder why it's not that normalized for them to cry or be excited like for a game.
Yeah, you're right. But in the field of battle, it's seen as weakness, and you don't want to portray that, not only for you but also amongst the people around you. Because if you lose it in front of your people, in front of your squad, in front of the, the troops that you're with, then what do they have? They don't need to be worrying about you. You're worrying about them. You want them to get home. you're not really thinking much about yourself at that point. A lot of people, oh, like this person, no, you're thinking about them, and that's why you suck it up and you move on with life.
Now, there comes a time in war where these soldiers are going to come back and they're going to re-enter society, and they're no longer soldiers, they're veterans, and so has it been your all's experience that a lot of people, veterans, not only veterans but just the average person, they really don't know what grief looks like? They really don't know. It's like, well, they don't know what to feel. They don't know what's next. There's deer in the headlights.
Well, I would say grief looks different for everybody, because everybody processes their emotions differently.
Absolutely.
And I would say that the automatic response would be sadness, but not everybody feels sadness the same way like I would feel sadness, or how you would feel sadness, or just the way that they would express it. I think people we have this general idea of what grief looks like, but what is it going to mean to you?
Like you said, for different people, it depends on the resources, their upbringing, all of that stuff. For many of them, especially for many men who are veterans, it's sex, drugs, or alcohol, or a combination of the three. So it just comes down to that. That's how they self-medicate.
The coping.
Yeah.
Or just how anybody self-medicates too, talking to a person is the last thing that they want to do.
Yeah.
So they'd rather put it to the back burner. And
that's my point. Do you think people do that? They self-medicate in unhealthy ways because
it's easier.
Well, and because they don't know what grieving looks like.
Well, and also one of the things that happens is particularly with veterans, they want to be around and talk to other people. First of all, it's all about relationship. I mean, I think that's Rogers all the way. It's all about the relationship. And if you don't form that bond and that relationship, you're never going to get anywhere with them. But especially if you don't smell like them, talk like them, walk like them, if you yourself are a veteran, then they'll open up to you a lot easier than they would somebody from the outside. Now, again, you have, you have a huge advantage is that you're a female. So it's easier to open to a female.
I think it helps me that my husband's a veteran too.
Yeah.
Because now I get a different perspective of it. And I say it all the time. I think if you're not in it, you don't know, but
exactly.
It's something that I've heard a lot. And that's why I push for vets, find your community, please find your people.
Right. And there's limited resources. I think there's this one guy here in town, what's his name? Randy Villanueva. He's making his rounds, and he's forming all these mud runs and raising funds to do just good work and help veterans because they don't have anyone to turn to.
But I think it takes more than that. I feel, especially in our community, it's so much more than just talking about it. We can't just talk the talk. We got to walk the talk too. We got to be there. And I feel what we do is part of us talking, but also opening the doors for people to feel comfortable to be like, hey, they talked about this subject and they seem like they know what they're talking about. Let me go try to talk to them about what I'm going through. Or I didn't think this was an actual issue, because everybody goes to social media. I have clients saying, oh, well, I was just watching a bunch of sad TikToks and, that it resonated with me, or AI,
But you have to be careful there with these online communities, because they can be an echo chamber. And instead of being something that's going to be helpful, it could be actually very self-destructive. Because the coping mechanisms they're utilizing are probably not the healthiest. And I think if these folks can have more information, or maybe professionals who are also veterans can actually, or have gone through some sort of grief or loss, can actually be part of these conversations, maybe infiltrate them and actually make sure that you have some useful, healthy coping mechanisms that are being introduced in these communities. That will be better, because the last thing you want to do is you're dealing with all this grief, and then you're dealing with all these people that are having this pity parties, and they're having all this very dysfunctional ways of coping that are going to be self-destructive, then probably that can be very problematic.
That reminds me of Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn, he came up with this model or this concept called the law of averages. You are the summation of the top 5 people you associate with.
Exactly.
And so if you hang out with all these people and they're constantly just talking about their grief, it's maybe the image that's coming to my mind is a glass filled with dirt and then water, and you're just spinning it and spinning it and spinning it.
Yeah.
At some point we need to pour more water in there and get the dirt out.
Exactly.
So I know that, when we think about coming to talk to a therapist about, grieving a loss, people expect for us to fix them.
Yeah.
What can we say about that idea that, therapy isn't going to fix your grief or take it away and you're going to walk out feeling like a better person?
Exactly.
What would you tell them?
It'll get you new perspectives, different perspectives. And I think healthier perspectives, because like I said, you can get stuck in this mentality or that is very fatalistic, self-destructive, and very self-centered too. So when we start looking at other perspectives, then people get more resources and they're able to deal with it in a more healthy way, I think.
Yeah. Going back to what we were talking about 5-10 minutes ago, what does grief actually look like? I agree that grief looks differently for everybody. I also think that people need some sort of an objective framework that, okay, these are the things you can expect. You can expect to bargain with, like the Kubler-Ross 5 stages of death. You're not going to go these in a linear way, but you're going to be depressed, and then you're going to be angry, and then you're going to feel that you're okay, but then you're going to take 5 steps backwards. I think that's one of the things that comes a lot in my therapy sessions with people that are grieving.
Yeah.
So normalizing their grieving process
and letting them know
the pitfalls that are associated with that,
the pitfalls,
anniversaries, all of those
the
things,
birthdays, the Father's Day, Mother's Day.
Yeah, and what to expect. I mean, COVID. Oh my gosh, COVID was so horrible. The 2 years after COVID were probably some of the worst that I've ever had when it comes to loss and grieving people. Christmas, they weren't around. Couldn't take my son.
I think we could make a whole episode about COVID, because I feel that even now we're still seeing the aftermath of COVID.
We're still seeing that. Yeah, absolutely.
And I always like to make that as a milestone moment, right? It's like, tell me about how was COVID? What were you experiencing? Did you experience any loss? Was it something that maybe they were just living with it and going through the motions of it? Or was it a moment in their life that, it impacted them so much?
Definitely was a watershed moment in society and mental health and all of those aspects,
I mean, yeah.
The generational event,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where the birth of virtual therapy started.
Yeah.
Because we weren't allowed to go to the office.
Yeah. That's how I got a lot of my clients all over the state.
Believe it or not, I actually that's when I opened my private practice, and I actually got the new office from another therapist that was going out of business. So that's how I got and I'm going to say 90% of my clients, they were face to face. They wanted to see me face to face.
So interesting.
Had very few online. So it was weird. I mean, they were coming with all the protective gear and all the stuff, but they were still wanting to come and see me face to face. So I'm like, hey, that's an excuse to get you out. Let's do that.
Yeah. So I know that, we've talked about this topic a lot. Yeah. We know that therapy isn't about fixing you in the grieving process, right? But I kind of want to, before we end it, you talk about what this is in the middle.
Okay. So these are my grieving jars. And I think this is a good transition and maybe a transition to the end of this segment. So the question that we're just talking about is, well, how do we help people, that come to us grieve? Well, psychoeducation, this is what to expect. Every person is different. So there comes a time where afterwards, they feel much better. But how do I move on?
Yeah.
And so I show people these. This is my grieving. These are my little grieving jars. So in front of us, we have 3 jars. And this is what, and I say this to my patients, this is what people think happens with grief. This is me today. The ball represents grief, loss, the pain. Then maybe about a year later, the ball gets smaller. You're not going to be sad as much. You're not going to cry. Maybe about a year after that happens. And then my patients, they usually nod. And then I ask them, well, what do you think the ball was going to look like if I had 5 extra jars? Well, it'll disappear. And then I ask them, do you agree with this? The majority of the people say they do. And then I challenge them. I said, no, this is not accurate. And so they start to think, and a lot of people, I get surprised, but a lot of people say, well, what a relief, because I don't want to forget my husband that died during COVID. Had this lady, car accident, she lost all her children and her husband. I don't want to forget my kids. I don't want to forget and I say, I mean, who's expecting you to? So, and this is where I ask my patients, so if this is false, what's an alternative? So then I bring out the other jars.
Mm-hmm. You have more.
Yes. So then I ask my patients, I need you to interpret that for me. The loss is there. The memory is always going to be there. If this is today, this is 2 years from now, this is 5 years from now. I asked them what their observations. She said, well, the balls are the same. And I said, well, what's different? The jars. And then I asked them, well, what does the jar symbolize? And they always say, and most people get it, some don't, the jar symbolizes you. It symbolizes us. And the memory of our loved ones, it's always going to be there. And we want that. We don't want to forget. We want to carry the legacy of the beloveds that have passed on. But we don't want that to take up so much space in our lives. So the very last thing that I do with my patients that are grieving is I help them rebuild their lives so that this loss, the pain, it doesn't take so much space. So, because that's one of the myths that I absolutely disagree with, that with time, you're going to forget. So, and this has helped me so much. It's helped so many of my patients throughout the years.
Yeah, sometimes people need to physically see it, right, for them to kind of understand.
Yeah, 50% of the brain is visual. So we learn a lot. We retain more information by seeing things.
I like it. It's cute.
Right. Increase the capacity.
Yeah. So if you are grieving right now, it could be a person, a relationship, a version of ourselves that never happened. Then there's
an ambiguous loss.
Yeah,
a loss that hasn't happened, but that you anticipate.
Yeah. So there's really no correct way for us to say, this is how you're going to grieve this version of yourself, right? Everybody's going to process things very differently.
There are steps that will happen. There are certain dynamics, that anniversaries that you'll probably be sadder during this day, during this time of the year. But yes, it's every person's different.
Yeah. There's a great book called On Grief and Grieving by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. It's a great, great book. So if you're going through that, I suggest you look into it. It's a great, great book to get.
Right.
Or if you want to talk to anybody, it could always be a friend, a pastor, a therapist as well. We want you to make sure that,
Or both.
right? Some of us do it all. We want y'all to know that it's okay for you to feel this way, and just it's a matter of speaking up and coming to a place that it's going to be like non-judgmental and
no. True strength is being vulnerable. It's being vulnerable with our thoughts, with our emotions, even though society tells us not to be sad or cry. So true vulnerability is real strength. So yes, I encourage everybody to reach out to us or one a therapist of your choice.
I appreciate y'all talking about this, even though it was very up and down on the emotional wheel. I could say for me. Yeah. But
it's necessary.
Yes, it is.
It's real.
Necessary.
It's real, indeed.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, if you want us to present on a specific theme, shoot us a
DM.
She is a DM. Shoot us a message, and then we'll review them, and we'll definitely bring that forward to future shows.
Yes.
Amen.
All right. Thank you. Be well.
Bye-bye.